play a good game. And you should be able to use the emote, Caitlin, the little picture, since you are a subscriber. Yeah, the countdown on Lichess is always super loud compared to everything else. You should be able to hear me now a little bit better. See if that balance is a bit better. We're going back to b3, playing an early rook to g1 move here. Let's go ahead and throw g4 up the board. Yeah, he plays that pretty quickly. Bishop e3 makes sense. Maybe f3, look to queenside castle. We'll play queen to d2 first. Oh, maybe I needed to play f3 first. He might be able to take on g4. Okay, he doesn't, so now we'll play f3. He could probably get away with taking it with the knight, and then he's on my bishop and on h2. But he has ideas of working his way into c4 instead. Okay, and he did berserk us. But I think I've had several good positions against this player. H4 doesn't work. What are we going to do with our light squared bishop? It could go to g2, but it's blocked by my pawns. Probably just has to sit on e2 for the moment. I heard that Alabama won last week. I guess a lot of the Santa Barbara players weren't there due to the National Open, perhaps, or some other reason. But yeah, apparently last Monday, yeah, it would have been the National Open because that's when most of us were traveling. Alabama won, so we're going for 2 weeks in a row now. This bishop's pretty good. This bishop I'm still not sure what to do with in this structure. It's pretty normal for it to go to e2 whenever you've got these pawns pushed, but only because you're going to be able to push these pawns more, which I'm not sure is going to be happening here. We could trade off a whole bunch of stuff, which is probably what black wants. Still looking for a way to get h4 in. I can play g5 now. Maybe that's an idea. g5, h takes, bishop takes. Bishop takes. Might have to watch out for the h2 pawn. Okay, let's try and calculate that. g5, h takes, bishop captures, rook captures or queen? Probably rook captures. If he ever takes on h2, I'm going to get to take on g7. The other option is I capture on c5 and trade down the d file. Now let's try and open it up with his king in the center. Now if he takes on h2, I'm going to take on g5, and then I'll take on g7. Or I'll take on, e7 from g5. And he's under 3 minutes. Okay, he plays f6. Interesting. So now if I move the bishop back, I'm hitting g7. Opening the G file should favor me. Wow. Just pushes G5. That I did not expect. Okay, so what's the idea? The idea is he's still on the H-pawn. I can defend that with moving my light square bishop or moving my rook. Both of those are options. I can also choose to just take on C5 now. Knight captures, pawn captures, queen captures, rook captures, king captures. And I still lose this pawn at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and move this bishop so I'm defending H2. And then maybe I go, well, I can't play bishop F2. That doesn't quite work. I wanted to play bishop F2 so I could play H4. But as soon as I play bishop F2, he's going to capture on H2. Play our knight into D5. Doesn't seem great. We can play F4. He just captures with his pawn. All right, let's defend H2 again. I'm still not threatening bishop F2 because then he can play bishop H3 and my rook is pretty much trapped. Interesting. Okay, I guess we'll capture there. I'll wander all the way over to H1. I think C2 is well enough defended. 3-4 times. And now H4. He can capture, but then I think I can use the G file. He doesn't care. C4, interesting. Do I save this bishop? Or do I just capture on G5? I can't capture on G5. My pawn is pinned. So don't do that. I will come back this way. We can even go to D1 if needed. Okay. He says no. He's just going to trade. I didn't want to push the B pawn because then B2 is super weak. I need to open up the position with the bishops. But I'm going to be losing at least one pawn. At least. He can capture on C3 whenever he wants. But his king's still stuck in the middle. Maybe there's an attack on that E7 pawn. He's down to 1:30 in a complicated position. I need to make some room for maybe my bishop to get into g3 or g6. Try and keep this position complicated with the time situation. If he captures on e5, I don't think I can capture back, because then he would fork me here anyway. Okay, let's hit the rook. Need to stop the h-pawn and run him out of time. I can take on f6. Now we can capture here. He goes after my rook. I go after his rook. Very complicated position. Yeah, very sharp. Check and trade. No, can't do that. We've got check here, though, picking up the bishop. All right, so now we're up a piece, but they've got an advanced h-pawn, and my king's still looking a little questionable. This bishop's defended. I guess we're running up the board. So now we're up 2 bishops. This should be a win. We're up 2 bishops even if he wasn't running out of time. Looks like we might be turning around this losing score against them. Okay. Bishop here. Take this rook. Check. I can always give up my rook if needed, but my plan was to try and checkmate first. Taking this would be one way to let them back in, I guess. All right, we go here. We're threatening checkmate. And we went on time. Okay, good game to my opponent. And that is our first win against them. It'll be interesting to look at that later and see how good the game was. They definitely had a nice position earlier. But once it got sharp and we had the time advantage, we got it done. Okay, let's do a quick pause here because we are doing a switch of pieces. Okay, I think that's this set. Yeah, I think I probably was. He could block with his rook, but it shouldn't be enough. Blue 2 for our board theme. Blue 3, blue 2. Okay, now we can rejoin. Forced mate in 11. Yeah, I definitely didn't see the whole forced mate in 11, but it doesn't surprise me that we did have the advantage. Yeah, he can throw in some checks. That makes sense. Okay, now it's a little brighter in here. Now it's saying plus 60. Huh. Okay, this weird set. Well, let's play c5. I don't think I've played this player before. I have. I played them once before and won. Okay. I forked their rooks in some game. Boy, that game, I don't remember. And I had the black pieces there. In this case, I've got the red pieces. Yeah, I like the rooks on this set. But I like all the pieces except the bishops. Greatly dislike the bishops here. So if I lose, I'm going to blame it on that. Yeah, it's weird how some of the sets, they drastically change one of the two colors. So if he pushes, I'm going to just go knight to d5 is the idea. This is one of those positions where in the past I would just be capturing on d4 without a lot of thought. But I've been thinking more about whether or not to capture on d4 in these positions. Traditionally, the queen also would, but the king wouldn't. The top of the king usually stays consistent in these sets where they've got the opposite colored bishop tops. But the queens almost always have a different colored top also. The knights are unique. I wish that they were a little more defined, especially the red ones. They're just almost hard to see with that shading. So am I going e6 in this position? E6 makes sense. This way, if my knight ever goes to c6, it can come back to e7 if needed. And I think I'm going to go for a fianchetto. I'm not sure when I should relieve this tension in the center. But they don't seem too sure either. You capture right away? I'm sure either way is fine. I don't remember which move Giri suggests. It wouldn't surprise me if he suggested knight f6. That seems more the style that he wrote his course in. I'm not sure that line is bad at all, as much as you're just relieving the tension. So unless you're getting something for relieving the tension, it just might take away some tactical opportunities for black. But I can't imagine it's that bad. Like right now I don't want to take because the pawn is blocking his bishop, not mine. Oh, you got the one for the dragon. It's good so far? Okay. Interesting. So he's going to just try and go after the c-pawn. Huh. All right, well, I'm not worried about that pawn. Maybe I push d5. Try and open up the center a bit. But if he's starting to win that pawn, I probably should have taken at that moment. Yeah, I've been really happy with his knighter, of course. Very happy with it. Actually, the line that he suggests against the Smith-Morra was one that I was unsure about. But I got the game in round 2 of the National Open, got the opening, the line in the Smith-Morra he recommended, and had a winning position on move 7. Now, I end up losing the game, but yeah, they weren't expecting it. They misplayed it right away, so I'll actually be reviewing that game tomorrow morning and posting on YouTube. The round 2 game, definitely back and forth. But yeah, all the games where I've played his recommendation and I've remembered what he's recommended, I've gotten wonderful positions. In all the games where I only half remember, I've gotten terrible positions. So, there you go. Let's play a6. I'm not sure if I'm worried about the bishop going to b5 or not, but a6 is usually a useful move. I don't think I can play d4. I can probably capture on e4. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, so he's going to just try and hang on to the c-pawn. I might need to play e5 at some point to let this bishop out. Not sure. My rooks aren't great here either. Maybe knight to e5 is an interesting idea. All right, let's take once here. And then if the bishop takes, I'll exchange. If the knight takes, I'm going to just leave it be. No, actually, I probably have to take it. I can't let his knight get in here to the d6 square. Oh, but now, can I capture on b4? Pawn takes, or knight takes pawn, pawn takes, bishop takes rook. Is that worth it? Probably not, honestly. Giving up this bishop for the rook is questionable to begin with, but along with the knight, yeah, let's go ahead and keep it. Yeah, if people aren't following the theory, expected theory in the dragon, they're just going to get bad positions for sure. Okay, one option is to play f5 and then take on f3. Do we go for like a kingside attack here? We might need to. Otherwise, we've got good chances to lose in the endgame or lose on the queen side. Pushing the f-pawn, especially as black, is something I've been working to get more comfortable with. So I'm experimenting with a bit more. On Saturday, I actually did it in one of my slow games with success. So I'm trying to be a little more aggressive with my kingside pawns. May backfire this time, but in the long run, I think it's an area that will help to improve. Okay. Capture the knight. Push f4. Lots of good options here. I don't want to take the bishop. Yeah, I want to just ruin his kingside pawns. And then just f4. And then maybe e5. Yeah, e5 looks like a good idea. Go after this pawn. Swing my queen over to the king side. All right, now here. I'm not really worried about winning the h-pawn, but getting that bishop involved should be helpful. Maybe even bishop f5 at some point to get the rook involved. I like my position. You know, he's probably got a good chance to win on the queen side, but only if I give him enough time that's where the game finishes up. We'll take here. Actually, now I might just be winning. So my threat is checkmate. If he moves the king, I'm actually going to go to the H file and then move the bishop. Yeah, this is nice. Okay, so how does he try to stop this? It might already be too late. I'm guessing king h2 will be his try. I go queen to h4. And he can't move his rook back to the g file because I just go back to g5. So, not sure how he gets out of it. Also not sure how I get the checkmate. Alright, so I have to play this far. Dream of Life, thank you for the follow. In these kingside fianchetto positions in the Sicilian, if your opponent puts the bishop on h6 supported by the queen, that depends a lot on where your rook is. If your rook is still on f8, it's usually best to let them exchange. If your rook's not on f8, then you could have some opportunities where you back it up to h8. But in general, when you back up to h8, you still have weak dark squares. So the positions where I've seen, or where my opponents have backed the bishop up to h8 and had a successful game, was when they were backing up not to defend their king, but to continue an attack on c3. That's whenever it's really worth keeping that bishop. So I can go check here and pick up the rook. That's probably the simplest. Don't see a checkmate. We'll take this, we'll retreat the bishop, and we're just winning. Just up a clean rook now. Okay, good game to my opponent. So we are 2 out of 2 here. There are even some positions where you can capture on h6. But you probably want to look at the theory for that. Because if it's not a good position to capture on h6, you're just giving white an extra tempo with their queen getting there early. All right, we're sitting in third place, not berserking tonight, trying to play some quality chess, and it is working out. Okay, we are going to make a piece switch here. Okay, I've only played them once, and yeah, I liked my position in this game. I felt like I had some good chances. So, what was that? I had the white pieces, though. Let's play a Sicilian, see what they do. They're going to play a closed structure. And then early f4. That's interesting. So Geary's recommendation when they play f4 first is typically just to play d5. But I don't think I can play d5 now. Probably just have to go for knight f6. And we'll just play a simple structure. So one reason that white pins this knight is because this knight is helping control e5, and white's really trying to push through that e5 break. So that move makes sense. I'm going to go over to g4 and pin their knight that's supporting e5. That's the square we're fighting over right now. I'm going to lose that fight. I just want to make sure I lose the fight at the right moment. Yeah, I think when you do it with this move order with knight c3 first, I think it's stronger than if you play it just on move 2. This move order in a closed Sicilian, f4 is much stronger, yeah. Okay, so clearly they know what they're doing. They got out of this pin. I'm not sure if the knight has anywhere good to go, but I don't particularly love taking it when I can't mess with their structure or anything. I should probably be looking to play d5 anyway to break down their center. Interesting. Okay, now I need to take the knight. Otherwise, they're just going to play knight to g5, and I could be in some trouble. I'm going to play here, and then I think e5. And my idea with e5 is I can move this knight and threaten the trade queens. So, for example, rook to h3, knight to h5, threatening a queen trade, and hitting f4. And this doesn't seem terrible. Okay, they play f5 themselves. Man, no nice knight discoveries. Knight e4 can't work. Okay. We'll just look to trade queens. This also prevents them from trading off dark squared bishops. What move are you talking about them playing bishop b5 check? Do you mean e4 c5 and bishop b5 check right there? Or do you mean later on in the opening? Okay, this is interesting. What about bishop f6? I'm losing some dark squares, but a lot of pieces are coming off. So, yeah, there is a line where they go e4, then knight c3, then bishop b5. That line is definitely dangerous. But there are a lot of different points you can play bishop b5. I don't think it makes a difference which way you capture. If it's later in the opening, your knight should probably already be on c6. Knight f3, d6. Yeah, then bishop b5. Yeah. Yeah, I personally block with the knight there instead of the bishop. But if you block with the bishop, taking back with the knight or the queen, both are good. I don't have a lot of experience with that. But I've heard that the queen takes can be pretty tricky. All right, so what's going on here? They have 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers. I have 1, 2, 3. I can move up for a 4th defender. That also makes it so I can capture without running into problems with them capture on f8 with check. Yeah, I think in the Najdorf course, Geary suggests taking or blocking with the knight. Yeah, the only thing you want to watch out for is if you take with the queen, the plans with the queen are a little bit different because now you're on a light square instead of a dark square. So you definitely want to look at those positions or look at some games. Otherwise, it's easy for your queen just to become misplaced. Obviously, at the master level or stockfish, they understand how to play with the queen on a different color complex, but it can be unnatural as black to play with the queen on the light squares. All Alright, we've got a slight time edge, but it looks like it's going to go into an endgame where I don't really have a better structure. Maybe I've got some pressure down the B file later. But I'm pretty happy with how we navigated this opening and mitigated the pressure on the king side. Yeah, I think there are probably some thematic tactics or ideas with the queen on the light squares that once you see them once or twice, it'll be much easier to avoid having the queen misplaced. Do we take with the knight? Or do we take with the rook? Take with the rook. They push. I capture. So take with the knight. My queen maybe wants to be on e7. Yeah, it's still not easy to get all these pieces off. Because now if I move my knight, they can capture on f8 and my other rook can't take. And if I move my queen, then my knight is pinned. So still a bit tricky. If they ever move their rook back to h3, we just go our knight back to h5. So I guess the move that concerns me a little bit here would be the move g4. Because then I lose my knight h5 idea. Yeah, and they played it. It just makes sense in this position. Taking away that move. Makes perfect sense. So how do I prevent them from playing rook to h3? I can't play rook to h8 because then I lose the knight. If I move my rook up, they push g5. This is a problem. Well, do I have time to play knight to d7? Because then if the rook captures, I capture back with the rook. Yeah, that looks to be my best bet. I didn't consider this knight move earlier, but this defends my rook so that my queen's not tied to it. So if they take my rook, I can either capture back or I could have taken their queen. All right, we got to exchange rooks at least once. Then we'll wander over here. If they play rook to h3, we've got a choice of rook to h8 or knight to f8. Probably rook to h8 makes the most sense. And then I can even try and play h6. That might be a bit risky. I could play h5. I guess the same thing with h6. And if they take, just hide my king on h7. I don't see a great way for their knight to enter the game at the moment. If they don't do anything, I'm going to just try to trade off rooks. I guess I also have the option of rook h3, king back to g8, and just guard with my queen. That frees my knight and rook up to cause trouble elsewhere on the board. Yeah, so he's thinking knight into f2, knight to g4, and then knight into one of these squares. Makes sense. Let's offer the rook trade. And then maybe get my queen onto the f file and look to cause trouble. So if they play knight to f2 and I go queen to f7, they can't play knight to g4 because they get checkmated on f1. I'm not actually threatening to take the knight though, but maybe I'm threatening to play like queen to f4. Every piece that comes off means my king gets safer. This pawn structure on the queen side, while it isn't better for me, as long as I don't lose that a pawn, I'm not sure it's enough to lose. Okay, take control of the f-file. We are threatening checkmate. Try and be a little sneaky here. He's taking his time. Let's see. Okay, what other ideas does white have? They could come through e3. I didn't consider this idea. They could go to e3 and then to g4. I'm not sure why I was only thinking about f2. And that also guards the f1 square. They can't go to g4 until they defend it again, but that could be a good idea. And as we can see, my knight not doing very much here. So knight e3. Maybe I try and trade queens, but what's my plan for that knight long term? Try and go to the queen side and maybe push c4, get rid of my doubled pawns. That could be an idea. I probably only want to bring my knight over there, though, once this king side attack dies down. So maybe if I end up trading queens, then knight to b6, then push the c pawn, that could be an idea. All right, well, now I can go here and threaten the g pawn. That seems reasonable. Let's do that without a lot of thought. He defends it pretty quickly. But now I'm not worried about my king. So let's try to play on the queen side. Yeah, rook h3 is one of those moves where you thread mate and it feels good, but maybe king to g8 is a good defense. And now the rook's misplaced. Okay, his knight went to e3. Protecting the c4 square makes sense. Can I just force through d5? It looks like it. Rook here, I can go to f3 or even all the way back to f7. And now I'm the one with the activity. If an exchange happens here, there could be a possibility of my rook coming up here later in the game, once that's safe. And my opponent's under 2 minutes. There is 5-second increment, though. And now I don't have a worse pawn structure. Well, I've got this pawn still, but... I've got this check to win a pawn, but do I have to worry about the knight coming in here? Probably. So let's defend f6 and defend the e5 pawn. And now this is a threat they need to deal with. Maybe they play c3. I also could take on g5. I didn't consider that. I could have taken on g5 right here. But then he takes the pawn with a discovery on my queen. Yeah, so I don't think I should have. But now if I take g5, I can capture his knight back, and my queen's defended. So that feels good. And they're down to 35 seconds. We're putting the pressure on. Okay, so they go for this check. Not a lot of options. And then we've got the classic question, do I want trades or not? Do I want to trade off pawns? Do I want to trade off pieces, especially with them under this time pressure? I just think I can force this pawn up. I can take with the rook. Okay, I missed that. I thought they couldn't take with the queen, but they could take with the rook. Yeah, that's a problem. That is a problem. We've got an interesting move here, knight here. It would have been interesting earlier. Not as interesting now. So if the pawn takes, I can take his knight. But if knight here, rook check, king moves, then they take my knight. And that's not great. Well, I've got to save the knight. Yeah, but now we're in trouble, folks. Now we're getting checkmated. Oh. It was going so well, too. And this is mate. Oh, it's not mate. That's mate. Okay,